Let's talk about 40k and 10th edition, about story progression, the return of the lion, about power creep, and about whether or not making 40k grim dark somehow makes it less appealing to Nazis. Tourists. But we'll get back to that later. For now, let us start this double channel video, as the topic is relevant to both my lore channel and my cultural commentary channel as well. So, without further ado, let's get on with it. To begin with, I certainly do have some mixed emotions about the overall direction of the lore at large, which we'll return to and expand upon a bit later, but let us start with a positive note: the return of Lionel Johnson, because this is a good thing, largely due to the fact that the explanation that the lion was just sleeping for some reason in the depths of the rock was always a really bad one. And even the Horus Heresy's attempts to justify it, that he had been severely wounded in his duel with Luther, and that the Watchers had taken him away to one day return, was really only marginally better, as all it really changed was that now the lion was sleeping with a bunch of Star Wars Jawas, rather than having a good old-fashioned solo snooze. It was a dumb part of old fluff, and rightfully so roundly mocked, which is why we're going to use this icon in the background here today, because it's a damn good one. But now with the return of a second Primarch, the setting really has changed quite drastically, hasn't it? And unlike the opinions from our tourist friends from PC Gamer, I do not think it has changed to the grimmer or the darker. If anything, 40k is a lighter setting than ever, and let me expand upon that note for a moment here, because the 10th edition trailer is full of woe and horror, right? Girly Man himself is saying the Imperium is losing after all. Surely that means that the setting is still grim and dark, correct? Well, does it? Or are we simply being told that that is the case, and by the narrator going, oh, okay, so this is the story, but is that actually the case if you take a step back and look at 40k as it exists today, and not as what it was, but what it is right now? The Imperium is operating 9 Indomitus Crusades battle groups. Each and every single solitary one of these is comparable to the power and scope of a Space Marine Legion from the Great Crusade, and the only one of these fleets to have been successfully engaged and destroyed was the recent one, the number 10, who was only taken down after Khorne himself personally materialized in the universe and hit it with his sword. In other words, these new legions, described as being even larger, or at least at the size of the Macarian Crusade, a crusade that conquered 1,000 worlds in 7 years, can only be stopped by the manifestation of a chaos god. And even that is not a surefire win, as the Emperor is getting more and more active as well, and has even proven able to invade the realms of chaos. Who is to say that he isn't going to be able to pull the same nonsense given enough time, or at least be able to defend against it? Furthermore, these legions are now led by not one, that was bad enough, but 2 Primarchs, and the return of the Lion has far-reaching potential consequences, as it could also see the return of Luther to the side of the Imperium, as part of his prophecy of the Lion's return was also that he would come back to forgive Luther, meaning that the Fallen might also come back into the Fall in some way, including perhaps even Cypher. Maybe they've even been working towards this goal all along. There is also, of course, the obvious martial ramifications in that the reason why Khorne was able to pull his plot device entrance was because no one could stop Angron's rampage. And so the anger and the blood, etc., summoned Khorne into existence. Well, If anyone could stop an angry Angron, it probably would be the Lion and Lothar together again. And let us not forget the Warp Squirrel himself, Cole, and the fact that the current Astartes strength of the Indomitus Crusade is nowhere near the full force of Primaris Marines he has squirreled away over the millennia, with some of the book sources suggesting he might have millions more of the damned things stashed away in secret stasis storage chambers across the galaxy. And that is not even the Chaos God of plot contrivances' only contribution. Cole can also terraform planets harvested by the Tyranids. He can and has invented new weapons by the boatload, and is rapidly bringing the Imperium back towards at least a Great Crusade level of technology, and probably beyond even that. And seeing as the Imperium is operating in strengths not seen since the Great Crusade, its industrial production base too must be roaring, with the amount of ships, ammunition, weapons, vehicles, supply parts, oil, everything that these enormous war fleets would be requiring. No matter how you slice this, the Imperium is stronger than it has ever been since Big E planted his ass on the Golden Throne. And this is after Chaos won their supposedly greatest ever victory with the destruction of Cadia. It's kind of like, how do I put it? The limbo of old 40k was, in my opinion, good, because none of the sides were truly in ascendance, but each one of it has its own flavor of threat. The Tyranids were always out there in the darkness lurking. Chaos was ever plotting and scheming on the next Black Crusade. And even the Imperium had several sleeper factors, like the hints that Guilliman might be slowly healing, or the presence of Imperial saints suggesting the Emperor's true power. And yet they were also very precariously placed. The Nids have had their asses creamed every invasion. Chaos has tried 12 times and failed to take a single world, Cadia, and the Imperium too was crumbling under 1,000 assaults all at once. It was a precariously balanced tower of porcelain dishes, stacked on the back of a sleeping bull. There was tension there, but when the story advanced and the inevitable happened, the bull woke up, the Eye of Chaos expanded, and Chaos won its great victory. For about 5 seconds. As you swiftly realize, as you look around the porcelain china shop and go, hold on, all of the porcelain plates are perfectly intact. As now the Imperium is stronger than ever before, and so equally inevitably, in turn, for anyone else to survive, they too must be stronger than ever before. The Tyranids are invading and encircling the entire galaxy again, and Chaos totally has even more Chaos Space Marines, despite not having access to the Warp Squirrel, and oh look, Khorne can just kind of pop into existence now too. It is the inevitable power creep of responding to one faction's increase in power by simply buffing every other faction too. And this is not a very healthy path, because it leads inevitably towards the Age of Sigmar style setting, where armies of billions take on 1,000 fortresses across 100 planes every day, even as Sigmar is just resurrecting his armies of space marines non-stop. Is on such an absurd scale that nothing actually matters anymore. What does the destruction of Cadia matter when the new fleets are conquering 1,000 worlds a decade? What does the loss of one crusading fleet mean when there are 9 others? And in turn, what do those other 9 mean when Khorne can just one-shot them? And what does Khorne even mean if the gods can now manifest in reality? When you reach the level of God reaching down and flicking your dudes over, there really isn't a whole lot more to add, really. GW has basically done a speedrun of the endless Japanese anime style of story advancement, where as soon as the heroes defeat a big bad, an even bigger bad reveals itself, and then an even bigger bad, and then an even bigger bad, etc., etc. And this really is next to inevitable when you are dealing with storytelling on the galactic scale. When one faction scores a huge victory, the opposition must either do something equally insane or perish. And since GW would never let a faction as profitable as the Space Marines disappear, the answer is a 1,000-year timeskip and the Indomitus Crusade, which in turn necessitates Chaos doing something equally insane or getting wiped out, and so on and so on. This, too, is precisely why I much prefer the old style of storytelling, where you looked at individual conflicts, like Vrax or the Taros campaign, where the stakes were still significant but regional and identifiable. This allowed both sides to have stakes, as you were immediately rooted in the consequences of success or failure, as you built relationships with the formations and planets and characters engaged in battle. But it also meant that a win or a loss wouldn't drastically change the overall setting and the balance of power, and so you could just make another battle in the same setting. This, too, of course, has its drawbacks, as if nothing ever truly changes, then you could easily argue none of those battles ever even mattered. But can the same not be said for the big galaxy changes as well? Even after all these enormous battles and titanic fleet clashes, etc., no faction has been destroyed. In fact, we have received a new faction, and a new Imperial ally, incidentally, in the form of the Not At All Squats. Because, well, if your setting has no end, no finish line or a goal, with the only objective being to keep it going in perpetuity to earn more money, which, cynically though it might sound, is the goal of 40k, well, all you have then is a perpetual motion machine that will just swing and swing and swing and swing. And if that is all it will ever do anyways, which it is, then I prefer at least for the swinging to be somewhere where I can see it and be easily amused by it. Closer, and on a more granular level, rather than over there somewhere, over the horizon, wiping out entire star clusters. And actually, that's an excellent example. When the original Death Star wiped out that one planet in Star Wars, it was a big deal. Like, oh my god, that shit blows up entire planets. It's a terror weapon of unmatched strength, and the rebellion must destroy it or all is lost. And then in Disney Wars, the First Order, with 1 billion of the resources and manpower, builds an even bigger one and wipes out like 5 planets in one shot. And despite being literally 5 times larger, its impact on the audience is 5 times smaller. Because there is a scale at which we just don't care anymore. And it tends to be what we can care on a level that we understand and can relate to. One planet is a big deal because we know how much stuff is on one planet. Vrax was a big deal because we know how awful trench warfare is. Cadia withstanding the Black Crusade was a big deal because we understood the biblical references at the gates of heaven standing against the hordes of hell, etc. And even then, most people mocked that plotline relentlessly for the 13 failed attempts, dubbing them Abaddon's 13 temper tantrums. But now, 40k2 has reached the realms of Disney Wars, where it's not just the destruction of a fleet by a demon Primarch, but the destruction of a legion by a god. Which also, of course, raises the question that I briefly aired previously: if you are at the point in the game where God is reaching down from heaven to flick your little toy soldiers aside, where do you go from here? Also known as the Saints Row problem, where you went from gang wars to alien invasions to invading hell, and finally to full-on workified disaster in the recent reboot. Option 1 in this case is to just sort of pretend that nothing really actually ever happened, and just go on with business as usual, because the more things change, the more they stay the same. And you prepare to sell the miniatures of the next Primarch to return. Or start moving towards maybe some sort of a soft reboot instead. Option 2. An apocalyptical final confrontation that wipes several major players off the map, Less profitable ones, of course, like Slanesh, for example. Getting killed by the Eldar, cause tits and violence is just not quite the safe sell that it once was. And maybe wipe out the Tau as well, because they too are genuinely loathed. Or kill a founding chapter or two, like you did in the War of the Beast. And then move into a different overall setting, like Age of Sigmar sort of did to Warhammer. And if that is to be the case, it would almost certainly be a far brighter setting. As again, despite the lip service, 40k is becoming a far more hopeful setting overall. It is still dark, no doubt, but it is far less grim dark. Which again makes this article so very, very amusing, as its take is that those damned Schnazis will totally not like new 40k, because new 40k is dark. Because you see, the Imperium, they might lose. Oh no! Can you imagine a 40k in which the brave defenders are overstretched and tested, and where their greatest warriors, the Space Marines, an ever-dwindling resource, a setting in which the Imperium are beset by 1 million invaders from every side, and they are thoroughly on the back foot. Almost, like, I don't know, old 40k? The one that supposedly was infested by the Nazis? It really is the hallmark of a true anti-fan terrorist. Someone who speaks, or writes in this case, with pretend authority, and yet quite self-evidently has not the faintest clue what they are talking about. Oh, and of course with a little bit of a political spin on it as well, just to hammer home the final nail, I guess. Oh well. Story complaints aside, how does the 10th edition look in terms of rules? Well, simplified, certainly. Perhaps too much, as the unit stat blocks are almost gone at this point, and the new army builder system, where you pick a HQ, and then 3 of any type of units, like 3 elites, or 3 fast attacks, etc., or up to 6 types of troops, or 6 troop types. It feels to me like it's going to encourage some real flavor of the month OP unit and cancerous play, but unless you're playing with friends, I suppose that is already the reality regardless. And I do like, at least in theory, the one-page rules for each faction, and that they are supposedly free, but, as a general rule of thumb, there is nothing ever quite so expensive as free. Call me a wizened old cynic if you'd like, but I very much so doubt that Games Workshop, a company infamous for its predatory pricing, will just be giving it all away, expecting nothing in return. Especially as the Codex and Edition grind has been a big part of their revenue these last few years, where a new edition drops just a few months after the last Codex does, so that you've got to buy them all again. I just don't see GW giving up such a golden goose that easily without some strings attached. Nevertheless, 9th edition did, as much as I hate the word, need some streamlining here and there. So making sure all the rules for any one faction is easily acceptable and referable would be quite nice. And an online application that can at least be, semi-favorably compared to free Battlescribe, that too would be cute, but might be asking for the heavens there as far as GW is concerned. And finally, I do like the addition of the OC stat, a objective control stat, meaning that certain units will be far more effective at holding control points, which will in turn maybe avoid some of the flavor of the week stuff, or potentially make it worse. I still have fond memories of Dawn of War 2 when they let Ripper swarms capture points whilst immune to suppression. Oh, the cancer. And with the recent leagues of not at all squats, my faith in GW's game design and balancing skills are shaky at best. We will have to wait until summer to see, though, on the rules front, and whilst I am not a fan of the Primaris or the new lore in general, and neither am I one of the current direction and focus, I do like what I heard about the rules. And honestly, a 40k apocalypse, well, it is starting to sound better and better every day, isn't it? Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. And do remember to let me know what you think about the video down in the comment section below, especially in regards to 40k's overall lore direction and the new rules and what you've seen of them so far. Until then,